Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Webit Global Impact Forum. My name is Afua Hagan, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session, which is entitled Trends and Innovation in Healthcare. Now, moving into the third year of the pandemic, healthcare professionals around the world continue to face unrelenting workloads and acute staff shortages. Over time, the continued rise of chronic diseases, increasing healthcare costs, widening inequalities, and of course, climate change will only add to the strain if we don't urgently rethink how and where care is delivered. In the meantime, patient and consumer expectations of healthcare are changing. Future health systems will need to deliver care that is more accessible, scalable, and equitable, whilst helping to preserve the health of the planet. Now, today, joining us to help unpack this topic and much, much more, we have leaders, innovators, and disruptors in the healthcare sector. So please welcome, first of all, Professor Stefano Bini, founder, chair at Digital Orthopedic Conference, and Professor of Orthopedic Surgery at UCSF. Welcome, Professor Stefano Bini. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Thea. Delighted to be here.
And then next joining us, we have John Nosta, CEO at Nostalab. Hello, John.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Again, yes.
Again, we're old friends now.
We are.
And of course, joining us, we have Dr. Stephen Wong, Chair Professor and Chief Research Information Officer at Houston Methodist, Weill, Cornell Medicine. Good afternoon, Dr. Stephen Wong.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Mo Forrest, Head of Global Commercial Digital Innovation and Head Botanist at Digital Garden at Almirall. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, where you are.
It's a good afternoon and from sunny Barcelona.
Oh, lovely. So, it's a big topic to unpack. I'm sure everybody watching along will have opinions to share. So please do share your thoughts and any questions and reactions on social media using the hashtag Webit. So this first question I will put to all of you. After facing the COVID-19 pandemic, what will be the new challenges for healthcare? Where do you see us in the near future? And what are the most important tendencies to be aware of? Dr. Stefano Bini, I'm going to put that to you first.
Terry, well, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation with this illustrious panel. And tackling this complicated question. So COVID pandemic put a massive stress on the healthcare delivery system. I think it's made acutely aware of the challenges that our current system has in its inflexibility in adapting and adopting. So one of the areas that I find to be most interesting that people don't seem to quite understand as those of us who are in technology, try to drive the adoption of these tools, is that there's this perception that the care system as it is now is better. And like, okay, fine, let's assume that one-on-one care is better. I think one-on-one care for half an hour with a personal physician who's tracking me is better. But the reality is it's not scalable. And you mentioned it earlier, it's too expensive. And frankly, there aren't enough doctors to go around, at least in the United States for sure. And so the question of scalability has been highlighted by this COVID-19 pandemic, along with the ability to flex our workforce to manage these patients. So I don't want to take up any more time. I could talk about now for this. I want to turn over to probably John or somebody else to take another take on that.
Stefano,
John, yes,
as usual, Stefano, you hit the nail right on the head. I think that flex was a very, very interesting word, because we found in COVID that really the key word is agility, that we need to be able to modify a clinical construct, a social construct, a political construct to accommodate an urgent need. And just as we get ready for the next virus, we'll be hit with an emergency that has nothing to do with the virus. It might be iodine for the use of a nuclear emergency. It might be desalination of water. So preparation, I think, is an elusive construct that we have to be very careful about. So for me, that elasticity or that notion of flex really builds itself around agility. And that agility is really twofold for me. One is our ability to change a system, and medicine is rather recalcitrant. That's a physical, practical ability. The other one is our mental or cognitive agility. We have to be able to think differently. And for me, it's not really thinking about left thinking or right thinking from a social or political construct. For me, it's about tech thinking, because that's where the universal reality will come forth and change the game.
Thank you for that. Stephen Wong, I'm going to come to you with the same question. After facing the COVID-19 pandemic, what are the new challenges? Where do you see us in the near future? And what are the most important tendencies to be aware of?
I think this is a quite a loaded question. You can take years, hours to discuss it. I think I agree with the two speakers early on. And I think the cognitive automations, I will see it coming. Cognitive automation means that using some AI, some intelligence to do some repetitive tasks, automate certain clinical things, because there's not enough caregivers go around these days, especially in rural areas. So you see more and more, but how cognitive automation can be fit into the clinical workflow seamlessly, that's a challenge. And I think that's something that we need to worry about. The other thing is, actually, this whole thing is, we talk about it politically and socially, is it actually raised a lot of equity issue in healthcare in this pandemic. And it's a bigger problem than tech, definitely, but tech can help a little bit to even out a little bit. So I think this area that I will see it coming, how it evolve, we don't know yet. The other thing is, if you're in hospital every day, you worry about is cost. Nowadays, after COVID, I think you can see a wave of hospital start cutting cost, even some of them cutting staff. And these are reality we are facing. So I'm an optimist. I think tech, if we use it carefully together with humans, we can reduce a lot of challenge here, like reducing lack of the caregivers, reduce all this fault, reduce all the redundancy and cost and telemedicine type of things. But it's really about the implementations and whether in the short term orientation, shareholder value type of era, whether people want to take a longer view to solve this infrastructure problem.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen Wong. Mo Forrest, I'm going to put the same question to you.
I think our colleagues actually mentioned everything. Like, to be honest, you mentioned it all right. I think there's a huge challenge from a regulatory point of view, but I wanted actually to maybe give a little bit of a different direction, which is the pharma. And this is where I come from, the pharma industry, and how we need to change as well. And this is the new challenge after COVID is how can we change our business models to start fitting the new, what actually was just mentioned, from start looking at new solutions for patients to complement our products from beyond the pill, and how can we take this new cognitive therapy to start supporting patients across the whole journey, to start even looking at new patient support programs that, for example, in oncology, how can we be closer to them? How can we give self-empowerment for patients to support their journey through the treatment? Start be part of the digital health industry to be more closer to hospital, to support them, to reduce the time with physicians. So now pharma has a much more important role. This is one big piece that I started to see, but maybe I would love to put this in front of our colleagues in the discussion today about the amnesia, that people started to forget what happened and everything started to come back to what they used to do. So what I'm a little bit worried of that because things started to get again back, most of the regulatory industry and the healthcare, they started to go back to the same old practice and forgot that they don't need to get prepared, as John was highlighting, that we need to get ready for what's next. But now we forgot because everything is coming back. So I think this is where the critical point that we need to keep everyone reminded about this and keep doing the action to change to a better, much more automated cognitive ways of supporting patients across the whole treatment journey.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, John.
Mo, yes, I agree with you 100%. What I'm seeing is expansion and retraction, or a recoiling to where medicine was maybe Q1 of 2020, almost a pre-COVID dynamic. And one of the most glaring examples of that is telemedicine. That telemedicine was held up as an example of digital transformation, of digital conversion. We're not seeing it. We're seeing a retraction. And I think that's a very complex scenario. It's in part reimbursement. It's in part physicians wanting to hold court in their traditional domain. It's the lack of awareness of patients that this is an option. So, just to echo that point, we have maybe taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but sometimes I think it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
Let me ask you something, John. Sorry, I think
it's such a good point he made, and I think it's important because it's critical to your first question is what happened with COVID. I think what John just said is we picked up something. What happened was, this is why I'm curious your thought. I think the problem wasn't so much, because we say telehealth, but it's this version of telehealth that didn't succeed. This version of telehealth and this quality of telehealth did not supplement, did not replace the quality of the physician experience. It's a bit like dial-up banking in its very early days. If we'd all been forced to go into it, of course you go back to the tele. That initial version was terrible. I think that we're going to be seeing, though, John, I'm curious your thoughts on this, is whether it was just an initial taste that we got and we get a better version of telehealth, one that's probably built into the Web3 environment, that we'll be actually seeing a significant deployment of this technology again.
Let's drag Steve Jobs into this discussion. It's always interesting when you drag him in. Steve Jobs said something very interesting. He said that the early days of television was nothing more than a radio show with a TV camera in front of it. And I think that's exactly where we are with telemedicine. Telemedicine is no different than a phone call with a pediatrician in 1965. We're not leveraging technology to advance. We're not using this crazy thing, this stethoscope, to listen to heart sounds. We're not using this crazy thing to do an EKG. It's really telemedicine 2.0. It's banking 1.0. It's also the early days of the internet. Remember the user experience? Well, the user experience created something that was dynamic and robust, that engaged us to leverage technology, to go online, for better and for worse. I think we need to develop not a UX, but a CX, a clinical experience that leverages technology as well as the human construct. And in the final analysis, what telemedicine will become is something that's better than the office visit. Because the office visit will be a punctuated reality once a year, once every 2 years, but we will have continuous care by leveraging technology and integrating the telemedicine concept into that continuum.
But let me ask you, I mean, here in the UK, I've reported on, I've written about the huge backlash against, I guess, this telemedicine version 1, 2.0, as it were, where people really want to see a doctor, couldn't see a doctor. And actually, a lot of people are still in that space now that they cannot get doctor's appointments. And people aren't really into or ready for this new version of telemedicine, as you call it. So how are you going to get people to support it, to trust it? That's the big thing, isn't it? It's about trusting it. So how are you going to get people to do that?
That's not the big thing.
That's not the big thing.
No, trust is actually the assumption. Patients have a problem to solve, right? Remember back to that idea of the problem to solve. And we're not solving it through telemedicine. The minute we can solve their problem in a way that meets their needs, then they'll adopt it. Right now, they still have to go to the doctor's office to get that prescription to do whatever it is that they feel they need to get. So we haven't been able to figure out a way to solve their problems. The minute you solve their problems, and there's a generational shift, there's also that piece important. But I would argue that the question is phrased incorrectly. That we're not meeting their needs with this current technology, which is why the backlash is, look, you're forcing me into this platform, it isn't working for me. I want to see the doctor because I'm not getting what I need. This was sort of what John was saying back. So we have to rephrase the question and push it back to those of us who are driving this technology revolution to say, look, we get it. Thank you very much. We're going to go back and redesign. I love this concept that John put out of the CX.
And I would like to add just one point to the same point. It's not about actually the ideas that patient doesn't want. And if you look at this in other industry, like for example, chatbots, at the beginning when we had the IVR, it never worked, like you need to keep repeating the word 100 times. And what it started to do is that tech started to create a different experiences. And that's why you had this bots, which start to guide you through different questionnaire. And this has become a much better experience. And now all of us, all the users are using chatbots in customer support, almost 90% of your users use 10% of humans. So it's more about the experience. And I'll go back that maybe it failed. It's not about patient that only trust computers. It's not about this. It's just the point that the way we created, for example, if you're looking about telemedicine, was not enough. If you look at, for example, in Digital Garden, we worked with one of the startups that started to do a very simple camera to detect different disease problems on skin and start support. So everyone started to use it in actually insurance companies that it helped before the diagnostic call with a physician. So no one has a problem of using technology. It's more about the experience. We started to translate the way we need to start looking at the whole processes of patient journey, not just translating the current patient journey as it is, because it cannot be replacing. I cannot be replacing meeting John and speak to him on a cup of coffee. You cannot replace this with a virtual coffee that we press on a button. It doesn't look like this, but we need to change the experience that patient is expecting to get his treatment. So it's kind of reflecting on the patient journey itself.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'd like to add, actually, I totally with you on this. I tend to look at the other angle. Frankly, I think the technology is not there. Not here yet to achieve what we want to do. There's still a lot to be done in technologies. Right now, all the digital health telemedicine, the way we look at are very silo. That's the reason they are not very successful. There's a piece of thing island somewhere there. They are not connected with the total picture. What Mo is saying is the total process. And that's why it's not very intuitive, because I know if you look at the manufacturing, the one part of automation doesn't help the whole chain. You have to automate the whole thing. We are missing that in healthcare. I guess it's a very difficult issue and it will be evolving over time. But I have to say that, take a case of chatbots. I don't think it's successful at all. If you look at the calling center, the way they are doing it right now, they are not record the whole thing and monitor customer conversation. They do piecemeal. And reality is we don't have technology to check the whole thing, and using AI to be behind the understanding what's the productivity, what's gain, all these things. The AI is not strong enough yet. So I think it's both sides, the process integrations, and also the technology is not maybe there, but had not been in the practice validated yet at this stage.
Now, we've talked about maybe what we don't have. Stephen, when we talk about things that don't work, what have been the biggest achievements and breakthroughs during the past 2 years? And what are the latest initiatives that you're supporting that are worth sharing? So Stephen, Wong, I'll come to you first on that one.
Oh, there's a lot of things actually quite exciting. We do many things. I just want to pick an area like the automations. We today, although everybody don't like Epic Cerner and PACS, all these things, complain about them, but at least they do one thing well. They put all the raw data together. And actually, with the existing raw data, you can actually pull out a lot of, do some more intelligent and analytic, do a lot of things about it. So we take a case is one of the major cost factor, at least in the United States, is really, we spend about $1 trillion in waste, in many things, in different things, right? And waste is not just wasteful, actually hurting patients. So we are using this big data systematically to look at certain area of disease, how can we improve it? And I'll take example of breast cancer. And breast cancer screening is about 33 million in United States screened per year. And we about 10 to 15% false positive. In BRAF4 category, we have, in fact, we're over 75% false positive. That means about 700,000 women translated unnecessary biopsy per year and cost downstream altogether about a couple $2 billion. And we actually put the data together, image and text, and then using AI to get a better calculator. And we actually test it with next door labor, MD Anderson, and also in UT San Antonio, multi-center trial. It's quite successful. I can see more and more these things coming in using predictive analytics because available of the large scale data, and that will be happening. But I That's successful, one thing. The other thing in the COVID, we have been using monitoring ICU. In early day COVID, no one had know how to prioritize the patients using ICU, using the ventilator. And we actually taking the 24 hours data and plus the continuous monitoring, just SpO2, we can identify the risk of mortality and able to identify the things. So these things are coming. And eventually I will see more and more in a major medical center like UCSF, as we have resources to do it. But after these things has been implemented, they will be shipped into the vendor product and to be in other clinical area. I think this is exciting area. I would see this is positive thing. I would see that. At the same time, I think I need to go back to the cost issue. We have to solve suddenly. We actually put a lot of holes in the current system. We need to improve it. And the technology can help, but the culture has to change. So the technology is technology. I mean, and also I noticed a lot of people using technology without careful validation. So we spend a lot of time validating. And also as SOP, standard operating procedure, to make sure when system going in, we regularly check it because demographic change, procedure change. Whatever is validated beginning doesn't work after half a year later. These are the things. I'm positive in the sense technology will be eventually good, but you have to be work together with the caregiver together. We are not at the Skynet yet. Okay, we still need to do with humans. So we have to make sure that the human and machine has to integrated together. But a lot of things in the shipping area is going in different areas. Even in surgery, I can see a lot of things going on in surgery. We're in the surgical room, and I see a lot of AI coming in. We are doing actually deep learning, transfer learning to guide automatic wire into a system. And these are things that not blue sky science anymore. This actually is real, getting real than what you think. So all these are positive things going on in the current era.
Exciting times. Mo Faraz, I'm going to put the same question to you. What are the biggest achievements and breakthroughs during the past 2 years? And what are the latest initiatives you are supporting that are worth sharing?
So definitely speaking from European point of view, I think one of the biggest changes is the regulatory, again, appetite to go through this. So for the first time, actually, digital therapeutic become part of approved content, and there's a regulatory processes for NFT in UK, sorry, of using actually DTX in Europe, in Germany, and in coming soon as well in other European countries. That's mean that there is a more appetite for supporting the digital therapeutic and to start supporting those type of new treatment for patients. This is actually opening the world and investment for all the startups starting to work on this part. So our side as well, we are launching the new digital garden curriculum, which is mainly trying to support the startups working on a specific remote supporting for patients with dermatological diseases. Most important for our side that it's started looking at new age and the new group of innovators who started to be supported by, for example, building the first CE marked and digital pre-approved clinical trials about digital therapeutic in the region. I think this is one thing that we would never dream about before COVID, and it would have been used like, for example, normally you get this approval after 10 years from US. So having this now in Europe and many countries, this is a breakthrough during COVID.
Yeah.
Exciting. John, I'll put the same question to you.
I'm going to try to take this question from a different angle, because I heard earlier on there was this discussion of implementation. It's the I word. You know, innovation is one thing, implementation is another, and they go hand in glove, and they're very important. So I believe that probably the linchpin of transformation and the big thing is analytics mediated by AI that comes to life in the autonomous vehicle. I'm going to say that again. It's the autonomous vehicle that is the game changer, because it's going to flip people out. You know, to get a mammogram reread by AI is nice. It's clinically interesting. It may even have some advantages, but it's disconnected from society. A 6-7 Tesla MRI machine is interesting, but again, disconnected from society. I think what people will see is when they get in the car and it drives itself. This will show them the power of technology and it will become a pivotal event in human history. So that's what I think is the big game changer here, interestingly enough, because we're all in love with our car. It's a universal truth. And when we see this, I think that's going to be an inflection point for the understanding and the embracing of how powerful analytics, AI, and technology really are in today's world.
Stefano, I'll come to you next. Tell me, what are the biggest achievements and breakthroughs of the past 2 years, and what are you working on?
Yeah, I just love being on the same call with John, because I can always build on what he says, and just gives such great ideas. So this is great. So look,
I steal them from you, so it's ping pong.
What you just said was so important. One of the things I talk about, and I'm going to take a step back, because we first talked about delivery models. I'll tell you what I'm doing, so I'm super interested, because also Dr. Wong just pointed out this idea that where we're really seeing evolution is in diagnostics right now. So delivery is going to be difficult and complicated. We'll see some pretty quick uptakes in the diagnostic side if we can just figure out how to pay for it. But what John said is, what I like to talk about is the idea of adjacencies. That you have to have a number of things come together once for some bigger delta to happen. So we see evolution in steps. It's not linear, it comes in steps. Things have to come together. When they come together, boom, it blows up. When you get the autonomous vehicle going, which will be another 5 or 6 years, you're also looking at a same demographic shift. At the same time that happens, you're going to see 50% of the workforce be millennial plus or millennial and younger. That's going to make a big difference, because now the people in charge are not afraid of this technology. And then you look at also data transmission speeds being into not just 5G, but potentially faster through some interesting happening on the optics side. So then you got data transmission, technology adoption as cultural arena on top of a generational shift. That's when it gets really exciting, right? To get into building one. And what am I doing personally? I am the most excited about some work I'm doing with Google. We had a big grant working with the ATAP division, looking at how to use sensors in a really interesting way to add a fourth dimension, which is time, to the way we measure outcomes. So my concern has always been, our best, in my world of joint replacement surgery, my best tool is a piece of paper that's validated at 1 year. Ask a set of questions before surgery, ask a set of questions 1 year after surgery, one time, and collect that data. It's useless. So what we're doing instead with the Google group is essentially creating a digital twin of a knee in 4 dimensions, the fourth dimension being time. Be able to transfer from a very inexpensive sensor an entire gait lab with data that's 97% as accurate as a gait lab, to track a patient's motion through space, and we focus on the knee just as a starting point, and then compare it to a digital norm. And the norm will not be an average. It'll be someone like you, who's your height, your gender, your size, hopefully at some point living in the same environment as you are, and saying, look, compared to normal for you, this is where you're at. We've never, ever been able to do that. And the ability to have so here's what's cool. You can build insurance models around it. You can really look at optimizing designs of surgical the actual techniques that we do, because we can't really measure the improvements. And we can allow us to move into the outpatient surgical arena, which decreases the impact on our heart infrastructure. There's so many details that come out of this little tiny improvement in the way we measure outcomes. And I think once we start hitting these tools, now we can see impact on the clinical delivery models.
I just to chime in on that point, the magic of innovation today is not a single point of innovation, but it's the confluence of multiple points of innovation. I call it synchronized innovation or syncrovate, because it's really the ability to leverage AI with robotics, with a variety of other technological innovations to create what is the ultimate disruptive innovation. So it's really the synchrony of these things coming together. That may really be part of the magic of where we are in today's world.
Actually, I'm really excited all this work. We're doing some of this. My concern at the moment is the healthcare workforce are not mature enough to take these technologies. And there's another issue. I keep on saying that we don't pay tech people well in healthcare. They go to Google. And Google doesn't understand medical domain. That's reason need to talk to work with you, Stefano. You can tell them what to do. But again, this is not as good as you are in there. UCSF have a lot of informatics group. They work with they themselves MD, PhD, they know very well. And I came from UCSF myself. So we know that I built PACS 30 years ago over there. So these are very rare cases, but really a talented workforce is really, we have all the idea. Execution in healthcare, I've been in business for 30 years. Very hard to find talented people to actually execute well, and that's the issue. And also, people like Google, Apple come to us. They always dream of this idea. I will entertain it, but every idea you do, you take a lot of time. And for example, simple sensor. Right now, even today, there's so much false positives. Even the clinical trial, like pharma right now, try to start a lot of digital health, checking patient at home. You are seeing a patient, even for a simple idea like sleep, you cannot even duplicate it in a home environment to check patient whether he sleep well or not compared to the lab. So now I know we have so many sensors around it. So these are the issue that we need to address it. The technology is here. I think the hardware is here. Whether there is a theoretical background to analyze, maybe what John referred analytical model, to make sense of this data is not here yet. That's a challenge. The vision is there. The hospital without walls. We don't really have to come to hospital or every time with a sneeze or something, right? I mean, so we should, the healthcare should be totally across our life. And this is a dream. And the hardware is there, but do we have the analytical model and the theory behind it to tie them together? I'm struggling with this myself, so I'm asking questions. I see that every day.
I would like to add one point in this one, because I think it comes back to the appetite, the appetite of regulatory about accepting, because I agree with you, like to get anything done in healthcare, it takes very long time. And most importantly, that if I'm a tech guy or like invented something, I will use a sensor and I will create like a Fitbit. If Fitbit, it was in actual healthcare, it would have been dead, because actually they will get bored, most probably bankrupt and actually close it. But because it's in the commercial side, it was like the appetite to accept, yeah, it was like 10% less. Those level of appetite of like patient monitoring, I think now in healthcare, the willingness is like, we will only accept if it's 99.9% accurate. You don't need this. If you look at it from a logical point of view, you don't need this. But because if like an Apple Watch, it's so easy. Yes, accept it because it's fine. Right. But if it's a clinical trial, which is just for PRO or patient-reported outcome, which is something so simple, we don't need this accuracy. We just need to know the trend. And then the system will start like, see how can we move forward from an AI. But I think we are still overcomplicating in healthcare to do one validation for one sensor. It cost me like around $2 million. Which no startup will do this. However, if we need to start looking at, and I will always keep speaking about startup because this is what I do every day. So I really want to create a processes from a regulatory point of view that can help startups to get into track. And then, yes, let's get things better by time, by trying it. Same like what other tech is doing, because if I am an inventor, I will just simply go take my stuff to Google, as you said, and they will put it in market, commercialize it in one day. However, in healthcare, you need 2 years at least life cycle, which doesn't make sense. So it's more about, again, and I will keep using it as appetite of the acceptance of data and willingness actually to support companies and technologists and in healthcare to get things in market. And I think this is where the bit from government, from regulatory need to take place.
Now, Mo, I've got another question for you, actually. What are the most important initiatives supported by Digital Garden, which is a dermatology digital health accelerator, powered by Almirall? Now, how digital startups are facing the dermatology challenges? So how are you guys doing that?
So one of the things that I learned, at least being in this field for like a couple of years, normally pharma need to be supporting startups to be focusing on their disease area, because otherwise they will simply go to where all patients, oncology or diabetes, and stop. So pharma need to be creating this ecosystem, which will be with hospitality kind of mindset that startups will be willing to come. So one of the things that we had in the first round when we created Digital Gardens that we had like 11 startups focusing on dermatology, especially here in Europe. It was very hard. And now we start to get more that it's reaching up to 39 in the same round, which it was very important. So I think this is where we as a company has to play a role in supporting and creating this consortium between other pharma to get startups coming, because no one is working alone in digital health. We need to be together. What actually we started to invest in and supporting startups is to try to look at two areas. One is the remote diagnostics for using cameras and supporting patients to start self-identifying and early diagnosis of a specific disease, supporting this conversation on a remote way of physician. And there's plenty of startups doing this, but how can we help them in validating data to become part of an actual trials? And that's why it was one of the pain points I personally have. And the second direction is how can we look at the well-being and support patients when they have like dermatological diseases are very visible diseases, and they have a lot of impact on human psychology. And so we started to look at how can we support cognitive behavior therapeutics and digital positiveness and positive psychology, and how can we support patients have a role in actually changing people's life, rather than just simply try to look at it from the current disease models. And we started to see so one of the things that we published was one of the startup in psoriasis, for example, which is very visible disease. They had 65% increase in positiveness in psychology, which is, we believe this is changing their life. Maybe it's not impacting our product, but it's changing their life. And this is the ultimate goal for us.
Good stuff. Brilliant. Now, I can't miss this opportunity to ask you all about the strategies you have to support equality in the health sector. So how do you think this can actually influence and improve your work? And what are the benefits of having more diversity in digital health, in your opinion? I'm going to put that to all of you, and I'll start with you, Stefano, Bini.
Look, thank you for the question. It's a really one that we're definitely need to spend more time and attention to. The digital divide is very real. The ability, however, of technology to help address equity issues is real, right? Because especially with telehealth, telemedicine, the ability to reach out to other data sets. Also, what I talked about earlier, the ability to collect data on varied groups of people so that we can actually, for the first time, start minimizing the bias in the data sets we use to then drive the adoption of technologies and ideas. That will also help. Once we collect more data, that just allows us to see that, to identify the bias in AI, because that's very real. Another area that I think is relevant is in terms of what I'm doing personally, which I think was one of your questions, is that the conference I run, the Digital Orthopedics Conference in San Francisco, is really intended to drive the adoption of these technologies within a specialty, not as much a specialty, but within the general surgery area of healthcare. Why do that? That's because at some level you got to come down to a specific output, a specific point of contact with the technology in healthcare, because healthcare is too big to tackle as one big thing. So by doing so within a specialty, we're able to then take these technologies and say, look, across the board, no matter who you're taking care of, these are things you have to do. The other thing we have to do more of, especially in my specialty, is to bring more women into the fray, because there's different points of view. And that's the last problem I was going to bring up, is that within technology, it's so male-driven that if we don't increase the number of the types of input into how to solve the questions, we're going to wind up having bias in the solutions as opposed to the questions being asked.
That's a good point. Dr. Wong, I'm going to put the same question to you. What are your strategies to support equality in the healthcare sector? How do you think this can influence and improve your work? And what are the benefits of having more diversity in digital healthcare, in your opinion?
I think this is more a technology issue, right? You're addressing. This is the whole organization culture ecosystem issue. I think it had to be bottom up and top down. That means the management have to be embracing it. Otherwise, it won't work. We recently in Houston Methodist system, we created the DEI employee resource group. I heading the Asian American group, but since we started, there are about 12 different minority group. We find exciting because suddenly people don't talk to each other, suddenly talk to each other, different point of view. And these are the things I think management embrace it, really grateful. and the bottom up is going up. So it's one thing you can help. The second thing is, although I'm an AI researcher, frankly, I ask you guys don't trust too much on AI. I mean, I've been in there, my PhD in AI in the 3 decades. I see many winters and summer. End of the day is mathematics. And everything in medicine is about validation. And we have to be carefully validated, because whatever we put in will hurt patient life if we don't do it carefully. And especially nowadays, we're doing some robotic automation in surgery. They're even worse if something else. So I think I probably take it as one negative view. I used to come from financial side and manufacturing side, but in healthcare it's very different. I take a different view in the sense that we probably need to, just FDA view, AI is a medical device right now. And you need to subject to the regulations. And because it is, the technology is powerful. This time AI is real. The first 2 waves for AI is driven by academic. This time is driven by industry. There's huge difference, big tech. So it will be real. And we need to have standard procedure. We need to monitoring it carefully to use it. And we need to integrate into it. That's my point. Both of them are very good, very exciting. Constant monitoring, treated as a medical device, can't go wrong with that. I know people don't like it because you slow down the adaptation, but again, you can't have everything. That's my point.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I mean, we have a few minutes left. So Mo, I'm going to come to you. Tell me about your strategies to support equality in the healthcare sector.
So actually, maybe one thing that I will take from different direction, which is the startup community. And I think one of the directions that in this regard, we're actually taking this as direction is trying to create this environment, which is allowing this type of diversity of collecting different type of startups owned by different and run actually by different groups in different areas without borders. So we always look at possibility of empowering startups across the world, and at the same time from with, for example, female-led CEOs and different groups, which is leading to actually almost half of our startups comes from a complete diverse background or actually location. So building this type of environment and ecosystem is allowing what we found that actually much better outcome for all the startups, because they start learning from each other. It's to be honest, it's more about making technology, and especially in digital health, is not related or focused on like either male dominated as what's happening in tech in general, and it become actually like who has the best to get value on the table. So we are allowing this openness in the mindset, and we started to see that a lot of even team members started to move between the startups, allowing much stronger outcome for the benefit of each startup. Yeah.
And finally, John, Nosta, the same question to you.
Well, I think that equity and inclusion has a higher truth, and sometimes we miss that truth because it is what is best for the system, what is right and what is true, and for me, that path of diversity and equity and inclusion is one that is irregular. And I struggle with that all the time because we seek out, let's say, equity in the context of an economic model that we know is not linear. Equity does not explode uniformly across the universe. Just look at the smartphone, how valuable a tool it is, but it was an expensive proposition to many people. The same thing with a flat screen TV. How many people sat on their couch wanting to watch the game on that 38-inch flat screen TV, when in fact now those are garbage. We want a 60, 70, 80. So the diffusion of this innovation is not regular. It's rather disruptive. And I think we have to keep that in mind, keeping in mind that the higher truth is doing what is right and is doing what is correct.
Exactly, doing what is right and doing what is correct, and sometimes that can be hard to do. Thank you.
No, go on,
John.
No, and sometimes the solutions are one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, three steps back. They're not always fitting to every construct. And that's where it becomes problematic and difficult for many people. So it's a struggle of back and forth. And I think that's the dynamic we live in now.
Yeah.
I'm more positive. I think the tipping point, John, tipping point will coming around the corner very soon.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much, panel, Professor Stefano Bini, Dr. Stephen Wong, John Nosta, and Mo Forrest. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.